7:20 in Trinidad and Tobago. Wouldn't it be nice if I just singing about things getting better, they would get better? But we've been singing, or many people have been singing about things getting better for a long time. But let's move along, because we're a couple of weeks away from the budget presentation. Don't forget, it's October the 4th, Monday, October the 4th, God willing, by Finance Minister Colin Imbert. The easing of COVID-19 restrictions have been a welcome addition to the business community. However, it's no secret that the country is in a less than desirable position financially. How can the country move forward in its current financial state? Well, let's get the perspective of someone at the helm of the business community in Tobago, Martin George, attorney at law, president of the Tobago Business Chamber. Mr. George, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Fazil, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I would love, before the end of our discussion, to tackle you on this whole issue of Police Service Commission and lawyers and so on. But because I'm
sure before the end of the week is up, we will be chatting about
you know how eager to go after you on that one. But just give us we're talking economy, we're talking COVID, we're talking Delta variant. We're talking budget presentation. How do you see the landscape, Mr. George?
Well, I mean, the reality is that the landscape economically for Trinidad and Tobago, the outlook is not good. I mean, when you have a large state entity such as NGC, which was, one of our largest earners of foreign exchange, appearing to be in the throes of its own financial crisis, and I mean, this is separate and apart from the issues currently swirling around. We're talking about, you look at the performance of it over the last couple of years and you recognize that its revenues are significantly down. You look at the fact that even though at present oil and gas prices are on the increase on the international markets, the reality is that our output from Trinidad and Tobago is so low that we are not reaping any significant benefit from those increased prices. So you recognize that we are really in a deep economic hole. You look at issues with WASA, you look at issues with Kientech in terms of their financial status. So the point is, we recognize that the pandemic has been another layer, on top of all of what has been happening. But we in Trinidad and Tobago have been running deficit budgets for several years. And I don't see that trend changing at all this year in the budget presentation. So therefore, we ask ourselves, what is the overall, in other words, what's the macroeconomic plan by the government to get us out of this? Okay, so we understand, yes, we were in the hole, we were at the bottom of the well. That's fine, we know where we are. The point is, we are not seeing any clear, easy economic indicators from the government to be able to get us out of it. We have suggested, as far as Tobago goes, and I mean, my focus would be on Tobago from an economic perspective. We've suggested that there are some low-hanging fruit that the government can, aim for. First of all, we've said repeatedly the immediate and unconditional repeal of the Foreign Investment Act. That has been the major barrier to direct foreign investment in Tobago. Imagine a nation such as Trinidad and Tobago that is saying that you're starving and struggling for foreign exchange, and you have a piece of legislation that is immediate, stop, and it presents an immediate block to anyone trying to do any serious foreign investment in Tobago. And as a result, you have all those persons who are keen or interested in so doing. They go to the other islands, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, Barbados. They welcome them with open arms. They roll out the red carpet because they recognize the mutual value of these foreign investments. So that's one of the things we have said repeatedly that the government can do. Secondly, we have said that the government needs to remove VAT from all items in Tobago. And I'll tell you why this is a benefit for you. And it's not just a benefit for Tobago. It means all Trinidadians doing their shopping, doing their purchases when they're in Tobago, they will benefit from it also. It means also that you now make Tobago a more attractive retirement destination for Trinidadians. Because when you get to an elderly state, I mean, of course, you are nowhere near that. But the point is, when persons get to an elderly state and they have to manage unlimited and finite financial resources, they, of course, are glad for any advantage that they can get to save a dollar. So if you have that 12.5% VAT removed from all goods and services in Tobago, then persons will consider, hey, listen, it's a lot cheaper for me to retire in Tobago than in Trinidad, because with that 12.5% saving, that's a big fillip and a boost. So there are many creative ways for you. I have never one to despair and look at the glass as half empty. I always am filled with optimism, because I think that in the midst of every crisis, there is great opportunity to try and find a creative solution and a way out of it.
And just as you mentioned, just in passing, that maybe I might be far away from retirement, just to let you know, I have my hammock and rocking chair already lined up. Just to let you know, to know that, by the way. But in any way,
advanced planning. That's called advanced planning.
Indeed, it might not be as advanced as you think. But in any event, you said you look at the glass being half full, but how much of that depends upon, one, the government looking favorably at those proposals, and two, taking it beyond a grandiose desk-thumping performance on October the 4th and actual implementation, because the evidence continues to show. Go ahead, Mr. George. Mr. George, if you're hearing, you've suddenly gone muted. I don't know if you're hearing me. We probably have to just pause and ask Mr. George to reconnect. We'll try and see if we can reestablish contact with him, because obviously something would have transpired there. But we'll see.
The government has
okay,
to understand
Mr. George, are you hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, what happened was that in the midst of my question to you, and when you responded, you went silent for a while. So if you would just please start over, again, asking the question as to expecting what from the budget, given the track record of statements and a failure to implement, just going back to last year.
Right, and this is what I'm saying to you. The government needs to recognize that when the heads of the business chambers give suggestions, it's not just in self-interest. It's because they also look at where they can make contributions, and by their suggestions, they're saying, hey, listen, we can help you to build the economy better, because at the end of the day, building an economy is always a combination of a public-private partnership. A government alone can't build an economy. You need entrepreneurs, you need business persons, you need people who will take risks, you need financiers, you need investors. Those come from the private sector. So the thing is, the government cannot really continue to ignore the cries of the business people, the heads of the chambers. You hear the frustration all the time for the persons who come on your show and they express that, they've given all these suggestions to the government, and yet still, it's not done. So the point is, we hope that at this juncture, particularly given our very dire financial straits and our very bleak economic outlook, when you saw the last report from the central bank, it clearly is not painting a rosy picture. And I mean, despite Mr. Minister Imbe's attempt at enthusiasm, to look at the figures optimistically, the reality is there. We are in an economic black hole.
And you mentioned about the business trips. I mean, just last week, Gabriel Faria, the head of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and prefacing a comment in one of those workshop things online, he said, well, the government don't listen to me anyway, but so and so and so and so. So the thing is that, where is the evidence, Mr. George, that, because, I mean, as I might have mentioned to you a while back, I was in Tobago just a couple of weeks ago, and you get the sense that there is almost, from the private sector, a feeling of despair. But from the public sector, those employed by the THA, they have no problems, because they continue to be fully paid by the rest of the taxpayers while nothing goes on. And it appears that the government of the day, whether ensconced at the THA or at the Red House, are happy with that arrangement.
And, that's something that I have complained personally and professionally about for years. You cannot have an economy being built with the THA, which is the central government, so to speak, for Tobago, being the largest employer on the island. But Fazil, this has been part of a deliberate plan and policy over the years, and it has been for the sole purpose of exercising political and personal and financial control over the island and over the residents in Tobago. Because in other words, if you are dependent on me for the THA job, then I control your destiny. I could tell you, well, okay, look, your contract has not been renewed. I could say, look, you're being terminated. And there's very little recourse that persons have, other than, going to file a legal action, which, is a lengthy process. So the point is, this has not occurred by accident. It has been a deliberate and systematic ploy to undermine the strength of the private sector and ensure that there's very little business opposition when it comes to decisions that are taken in Tobago. And therefore, what you saw on the ground, Fazil, is the reality. There are many businesses that have suffered. Some have closed down. Some have gone into, receivership. Some of the banks have foreclosed on them. And that's the reality of what has happened in Tobago. And the point is that if it is that the government is serious about trying to rebuild the Tobago economy, they have to understand that they need to try to facilitate and empower the Tobago business sector as much as possible.
And therefore, in the time that we have available, do you actually see that happening if we're talking about the budget presentation? And again, the cynics like me will say that this is just another stop on the series of performances that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, where individuals like yourself and others will want to talk optimistically when we all know what is really going to happen. But let me ask you the question for what it's worth. You outlined a couple of proposals. You repeated them ad nauseum. You've said it many times before. Do you believe that in the budget presentation on October the 4th, that there will be something to give you a level of optimism, a level of expectation that things are going to be done differently for the business community?
Fazil, in terms of the core suggestions that we have outlined, I unfortunately have very faint hope, I will say. What I will say, though, is I imagine, given the upcoming THA elections, that there will be some sweeteners thrown in for the people of Tobago in the sense of what has been traditionally known in Trinidad and Tobago as an election budget. So in other words, for Tobago, I think you will see a few sweeteners thrown in. But the point is, these are usually just short term, and they're usually just for the purpose of trying to boost an election campaign with the aim of securing victory. So those are not the kinds of things that we really would be looking for or hoping for. We are hoping for long-term sustainable things that can really help to build the foundations for some kind of economic sustainability. We've suggested for you in the past that, you look at making Tobago an offshore financial center. That in itself generates and stimulates so much business. You look at a place like Bermuda. Bermuda is the leading center of reinsurance in the world. A little island like Bermuda. So the point is, there are possibilities. You look at Caymans with all their offshore banking. Why is it not possible for us to do that? Because there are persons all over the world who are looking to find creative ways for investing their monies. So the point is, we can develop that kind of sector in Tobago. You make Tobago that kind of center, so therefore people are willing to come here, invest their money, bank their money, save their money, and therefore we all would be able to benefit from it. But that takes a little bit of creativity, ingenuity, and innovativeness, which thus far, respectfully, we've not seen from the leaders in Tobago.
And before we conclude, Mr. George, we just have a couple of minutes left, and I just want to squeeze out from you just a perspective on, you're a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, you're a practicing attorney at law, you deal with many different issues. How do you feel about all these issues? I know it's a short space of time, but if you could just see how you feel as someone who would have been involved with the Police Service Commission as an example. How do you feel about this?
Well, it is... it's gone past the comedy of errors. I think it's reached the stage of the theater of the absurd, quite frankly. You know, I mean, because you see misstep after misstep after misstep, and you wonder, when will this charade end? Because you ask yourself, I mean, just from the start, if it is that someone's contract has ended and their term of appointment as commissioner has ended, then how do you realistically get the authority to appoint them as acting commissioner? Then when they're acting commissioner, you then send them on vacation. How do you get the authority to send them on vacation if their contract has ended? Where's that authority from? Vacation from what? From the job you no longer have? It makes absolutely no sense. And I mean, it's been blunder upon blunder upon blunder. Then you ask yourself, okay, what is the substantive rank which Mr. Gary Griffith holds within the police service? In other words, if he's no longer commissioner, if he's no longer acting commissioner, what is his substantive rank? Because it would have been a situation where what they do sometimes is they swear you in as an SRP, and then they use that to appoint you as commissioner. But if you're no longer commissioner and you're not acting commissioner, what are you within the service? You know, I mean, and all of these mistakes could have been avoided. This whole imbroglio, you know, could have been, you know, sidestepped by careful planning and foresight and forward thinking, because you knew that it was a 3-year contract from the start. So therefore you had 3 years basically to start putting things in place to get this organized. So to come now, I mean, granted, there was a legislation that the government rushed in June, which, you know, changed the rules of the game. But if you had your planning in place even before that, then you would have been able to adapt quickly and get this process, you know, flowing a lot smoother and with a lot more confidence for the public, you know. And then, I mean, the missteps and errors kept, you know, continuing all along. We saw a correspondence that allegedly emanated from former Justice of Appeal Stanley John. And, you know, I mean, one can only scratch one's head and wonder what would have been the thinking behind penning such a correspondence, if it is that it really did emanate, you know, from the source that it's claimed. Because if it is that someone asks a question in terms of, you know, like, am I the subject of the investigation or any such thing, then, I mean, I would have thought that the simple answer would be, listen, you direct those questions to those who appointed me. They're the ones who will be able to explain to you the ambit of my remit. I would not commit myself in writing that way, you know, and, you know, then now that letter is apparently being used and weaponized against the very police service commission that would have appointed the investigator. You know, I mean, it's just a comedy of errors. And, you know, questions also have to be asked, because I have seen in the public space a letterhead purportedly from the office of the Commissioner of Police, and I saw a signature and I saw the title below saying Commissioner of Police, and I wondered, I said, is this proper? Is this correct? Is this permissible? You know, but of course, I mean, I am not in the Police Service Commission anymore. So, you know, I...
Thank God for that, I suppose, because we'd have been really tackling you this morning on it. But, Mr. George, I'm almost sorry, I might be smiling, but I'm almost sorry I asked you the question, because this just seems to be, as you said, the theater of the absurd that we have in Trinidad. But again, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure for you. Good morning to
Thank you very much once again, Martin George with us, just reminding us how ludicrous this situation is, where you have grown people going about the place pretending to be serious. Well, serious, yes, but about something that is just encapsulates the level of incompetence and poor governance. Should I say piss poor? Yeah, piss poor governance in Trinidad and Tobago. Or let me use a proper term, urinatingly unacceptable. Because to say piss poor might be offensive. Urinatingly unacceptable. 7:38 in Trinidad and Tobago. Here's a sunset looking towards Canning's Point with the lights of the Coast Guard base at Stobles Bay, captured by Robert Tardier. And it's a very interesting image. And let's give you another traffic update, courtesy of traffictt.com. A lot of people coming into downtown Port of Spain, waiting on the lights to get the green light in the area of Central Market. And we'll be right back.